Overheard my wife's late-night call with her ex from high school. He still thinks you're just a clueless paycheck with a pulse. My boss and coworkers knew, and they laughed behind my back. My response: quit my job, sold the house she wanted, and gifted her a petty surprise with the mortgage debt. A decade later, I'm the CEO who bought her entire company. It was just past 11:30 on a Thursday night, and I remember because the microwave clock blinked red in the dark kitchen when I walked in. I had stayed late at the office, again, trying to fix a discrepancy in the vendor invoice report that no one else seemed to care about. My head was pounding from too much stale coffee, and I had that dull ache behind my eyes from staring at a screen too long. I opened the fridge, grabbed a bottle of water, and was about to head upstairs when I heard her voice. Alina, my wife of 6 years. It was low, soft, but not in that affectionate way she used to speak to me when we were first dating. No, this tone was different, secretive, almost giddy. I paused at the foot of the stairs. Her bedroom door was half shut. He's still the same, completely oblivious. Honestly, Darren, it's almost sad, she whispered, laughing lightly. I stopped mid-step. Yeah, he still thinks I chose this house for us. Please, she scoffed. I picked it because I knew the mortgage would keep him on a leash. It's perfect. He's basically just a paycheck with a pulse. She laughed again, soft, cruel, sharp. I stood there, frozen. Not because I was shocked she was talking to her ex from high school, Darren, or even that she was saying things behind my back, but because it all suddenly made sense. The strange coldness in the mornings. The way she flinched when I touched her. The constant business trips and locked phone screen. My chest felt tight. I backed away slowly, water bottle still in hand, and sat on the bottom stair like the air had been sked out of the room. That was the moment it all fell apart. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. I lay awake in the guest room with my eyes on the ceiling fan, replaying every moment of the last 6 years. Every anniversary dinner, every weekend spent fixing up the house she insisted we absolutely needed because it had character. Every fight she started about money or how I didn't understand her ambition. It was all bullshit. I didn't confront her the next morning. I acted normal, made coffee, even offered her a bagel, which she declined, as always. Big day today? I asked, stirring my cup like my hands weren't shaking. She glanced at her phone. Yeah, brand campaign launch. I'll probably be home late. Right. Work that day felt like walking through a dream where everyone knew something you didn't. I started to wonder, had anyone else noticed? Had everyone known? Turns out, they had. Later that afternoon, I went to the break room to grab another coffee. I walked in just as two guys from the sales department, Ben and Ray, were deep in conversation. Man, I saw Alina again last weekend. She was at that rooftop bar with that Darren guy. Bold move, considering she's still married. I froze behind the vending machine. Seriously, poor Colby, man, Ray said. Guy thinks he's living the dream. She's running circles around him. They laughed. Loud. Like I was the punchline of an inside joke that had been running for months. I backed out of the room quietly, went to my desk, packed up my stuff, and left. I never returned. I didn't tell anyone what happened. Not my friends, not my coworkers, not even my younger sister who used to call me every Sunday for life advice. I just shut down. Everything felt fake. The life I thought I had, the marriage I thought I was in, it was all some elaborate set, and I had been the actor who didn't realize he was being filmed for a comedy. Except it wasn't funny. I spent the next week in a daze. Drove to nowhere in particular. Ate gas station food. Slept in my car for a few nights in the Walmart parking lot. It was humiliating, but weirdly clarifying. Then I got an idea. A cold, calculated, bitter little idea that made me smirk for the first time in days. First, I contacted the bank. The house we had bought together, her dream home, was in both our names, but I had quietly refinanced it under mine a year ago. She had signed the documents in a hurry, like always, not even reading them. I had taken full ownership of the mortgage. A little financial maneuver I did back when I still thought I was protecting her in case of an emergency. Funny how that worked out. Then I sold it. The market had dipped. The house was worth less than what we owed. I took the hit, accepted the loss. But before I signed over the final documents, I added her as the co-signer on the remaining debt and removed myself. It wasn't illegal. Shady? Maybe. But she had signed everything. Her signature was right there in blue ink. While she was in Chicago on a girls' weekend, the house was emptied, the locks changed, and all her stuff was placed in a storage unit under her name, with 1 month's rent paid. When she came back on Sunday night, I was already gone. She called. Then she screamed. Then came the texts. Vile, desperate, furious. You can't do this to me. You bastard. You ruined me. This is fraud. You're a piece of SHD. I didn't respond. I just blocked her number and walked into the nearest public library to use the free Wi-Fi to start my new life. I took the rest of the money I had, what little remained after the sale, and moved west. Portland. It felt far enough and quiet enough to disappear. I lived frugally, rented a room from an old couple who thought I was a traveling author. Worked part-time in a warehouse during the day, studied business analytics online at night. I wasn't rebuilding just to survive. I was preparing. I got into consulting. Started small, helping local businesses clean up their books, optimize routes, track costs. I had experience, after all. Within 2 years, I had a small but reliable client base. People liked me, trusted me. That trust turned into investment. I joined a tiny shipping startup called Larkport Logistics. It was a mess, but I saw potential. I became their interim CFO, then COO. Then the CEO offered to sell his stake after a rough year. I bought it, every last share. I had help from one of the clients who believed in me. An older man named Wes who reminded me of what real mentorship looked like. He said, "People like her, they gamble on charm. You? You gambled on pain. That's more sustainable." It wasn't until almost 10 years after I left that I saw her name again. Alina Winter. She was working at a fashion company out of Minneapolis now. I recognized the brand immediately, Claro Studio. They were struggling. Layoffs, bad press, leaking money like a sieve. They needed a buyer. And I had cash. More than enough. So I bought them. Every single thread of it. Walking through the lobby of Claro Studio felt like stepping into a memory I didn't know I still had. High ceilings, exposed beams, the faint smell of coffee, and overly floral perfume. Glass panels everywhere, sunlight bouncing off them like the building was trying too hard to look youthful and alive. It wasn't. The cracks were showing. In the morale, in the disorganized front desk, in the haphazard signage that looked like it hadn't been updated in months. And there she was, Alina, standing by the espresso machine, chatting with some junior staffer. I could hear the performance in her voice even from a distance. How she exaggerated her laugh. How her hand flicked her hair over her shoulder in that old habitual move she thought made her look effortless. She hadn't noticed me yet. I walked up to the receptionist. A young guy in a slightly wrinkled shirt looked up from his phone. "Hi, I'm here for the 10:30 with Mr. Caldwell," I said calmly. He blinked. "Oh, yeah," he said, "to send you straight up. 8th floor, corner office." I nodded and turned toward the elevators, but not before catching her gaze. Alina froze. Her expression didn't immediately register recognition. It took her a second, and then another, and then her mouth parted slightly. "Colby," she said, barely above a whisper. I looked at her. No smile. No emotion. Just a polite, neutral nod. "Alina." The elevator dinged before she could say anything else, and I stepped in. The doors closed. I didn't look back. The meeting was short. Claro's board was ready to fold. My offer had already gone through, pending final signatures. Caldwell, an aging executive who'd clearly lost his grip, didn't even try to negotiate. I could see the relief on his face. He wanted out. I was his parachute. We signed the papers, shook hands, and I walked out with full control. Just like that. It didn't take long for word to get around. The new owner of Claro was mysterious, private, low profile. Nobody knew my name yet. Not officially. I spent the next week cleaning house, silently, deliberately. Not with firings, not yet. I started with the systems. Payroll, client accounts, expense logs. I wanted to understand the rot before I started scraping it out. But I kept one eye open for Alina. She still worked there. VP of brand strategy, according to the org chart. Ironic, considering the brand had no strategy left. Every afternoon, I'd watch from my office as she made her rounds. Heels clicking against the concrete, voice a little too loud, expressions a little too exaggerated. I could tell she was scrambling to stay relevant. I gave her a week. Then I scheduled the meeting. She walked into the conference room cautiously, like she already knew something was off. "Hi," she said, forcing a smile. "I heard there's a restructuring coming." I gestured to the chair across from me. "Sit." She did, folding her hands in her lap. I opened a folder. Her performance reviews. Her expense records. A few flagged emails that were concerning. "Do you know how much this company has lost in the last year?" I asked, my voice even. She paused. "I mean, yes, we've had some difficulties, but 3.4 million. Most of that under your department." Her smile cracked slightly. "Look, I didn't have the resources I needed. Caldwell, he didn't support my campaigns." I nodded. "And your campaign budget for the winter quarter?" She swallowed. "I believe it was 400,000. "Correct. And yet you went over by 63 grand. For what? Champagne and guest stylists from L.A. That brought zero ROI. Her posture stiffened. "I was trying to build the brand." I looked her straight in the eye. "You were trying to build yourself? And you failed." Her face reddened. "Excuse me." I stood, walked to the window, looked down at the street below. "Alina, you once said I was just a paycheck with a pulse," I said quietly. "Do you remember that?" The room went dead still. I turned around slowly. Her eyes were wide. The color drained from her face. "You," she started, voice cracking. "You heard that?" I nodded once. "I heard it all. The late-night call with Darren. The lies. The manipulation. The house you picked to control me." She stood up, voice rising. "That was, Colby, that was 10 years ago. People change." "No," I said flatly. People reveal themselves. You revealed yourself, and I believed you. She sat back down, stunned into silence. Now, I continued, walking back to the table. You have two options. Step down with a severance package I'm generously offering because I've moved on. Or stay and report directly to a 24-year-old analyst who actually understands brand performance and doesn't blow client budgets on influencer brunches. Her jaw clenched. You can't humiliate me like this. I'm not humiliating you, Alina. I'm giving you a choice, which is more than you ever gave me. She stared at me for a long time. Then she looked away, her voice barely audible. You really planned this? I didn't respond. Because yes, I had. Every single moment of this confrontation had lived in my mind for years. Through every sleepless night in my car, every cold dinner eaten in silence, every time I'd stared at a spreadsheet knowing I was working towards something bigger than revenge, something that looked a lot like justice. Later that week, she submitted her resignation. She didn't say goodbye, didn't look at me when she passed by my office, just dropped her badge off at the front desk and walked out, her heels echoing one last time. But I wasn't satisfied. Not yet, because her story wasn't finished. And neither was mine. The silence she left behind wasn't peaceful. It was hollow. For all the satisfaction I expected to feel watching Alina resign, there was a strange quiet that lingered after she left. Not regret, not remorse, just space. Like the absence of something that had taken up too much room for too long. But I didn't have time to dwell. Claro was still a mess, and now it was my name on the door. I spent the next month gutting the operation, streamlining departments, replacing deadweight, and renegotiating contracts that had been bleeding the company dry. It wasn't glamorous. I was working 12-hour days again, sometimes more. But it felt different this time. This time, it was mine. I'd hired a new head of brand, a sharp kid named Jules. Only 24, but smarter than half the board combined. They'd interned under one of my former clients and had a no bullshit attitude that reminded me of who I used to be before I let people like Alina mold me into something useful and silent. One afternoon, about 6 weeks after Alina left, I was in my office reviewing quarterly projections when Jules walked in holding a folder. You're going to want to see this, they said, tossing it on my desk. What is it? I asked without looking up. An anonymous tip came in through the HR portal. I opened it. Inside was a printed email thread between Alina and another former exec, Carla Mayfield, VP of External Affairs, who I'd let go shortly after the acquisition. The emails were dated just before the purchase went through. At first, it looked like idle gossip. Then I saw it. A forwarded message from Carla to Alina, subject line. Soft leak to Dar. Let's stall. Inside were plans to delay certain financial reports, obscure liabilities, and pump up projected earnings. It wasn't just shady, it was fraudulent. They were artificially inflating Claro's health before the sale. My sale. I leaned back in my chair, fingers steepled under my chin. She knew, I muttered. She knew I was coming. Jules folded their arms. Looks like she and Carla were trying to offload the company to anyone. Probably thought they'd get golden parachutes if they made the numbers look good. Except I didn't keep either of them around long enough to cash out, I said. But they still committed fraud. Could open up civil action, Jules added, arching an eyebrow. I nodded slowly, heart pounding with something I hadn't felt in years. Not rage. Purpose. Find out what you can. Quietly. And keep this between us. The next day, I drove across town to a cafe I used to go to back when life was simpler. Back when coffee was just coffee, not strategy fuel. I sat outside, sipping a black roast, and stared out across the street at the old bank building. The same one where Alina and I had signed the mortgage papers for the Roseville house. I could still hear her voice in my head from that day. Bright, bubbly, fake as hell. This is it, babe. Our forever home. The memory made my stomach turn. I pulled out my phone, opened my gallery, and scrolled past a few recent snapshots until I found it. A picture from years ago. The backyard of the old house. Me in work boots, sweat-stained shirt, holding a drill. Smiling. Not for the camera. For her. I didn't recognize that man anymore. By the following week, Jules had uncovered more. The paper trail wasn't massive, but it was damning. Internal memos, backdated approvals, inflated invoices, small things, easy to miss individually, but together? A clear attempt at corporate deception. Most of it happened under Alina's watch. It was enough to bring in the legal team. I hadn't wanted to play that card. Honestly, I didn't want to see her again. But this wasn't about bitterness anymore. This was about principle. I scheduled a formal inquiry. Not a lawsuit. Not yet. Just enough to get her attention. 3 days later, she called. Blocked number. I let it ring out the first time. Then she texted. We need to talk. Please. Just 5 minutes. I stared at the screen, thumb hovering over the screen. Then I replied. My office. Friday. 9 a.m. Don't be late. She arrived right on time. Dressed sharp, like she was still holding onto the last scraps of authority. Hair pinned up. Neutral heels. That same perfume I'd once saved up to buy her in Paris. She looked like a ghost of the woman I'd once loved. familiar in form, hollow in spirit. You're not pressing charges? She asked as soon as the door shut. I raised an eyebrow. Did I say I wouldn't? Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. I gestured for her to sit. You tried to pass off doctored earnings during an acquisition. You realize how illegal that is, right? She ran her hands down the sides of her skirt. It wasn't like that. Carla. She said we'd lose everything if we didn't clean up the books a little. I scoffed. Clean up? You don't understand. Caldwell was panicking. We were all under pressure. You were trying to scam whoever bought the company. You just didn't realize it would be me. Her eyes flicked up. Was that your plan all along? To buy Claro? Just to get back at me? I leaned forward. My plan was to survive you. Everything else? That's just a bonus. We sat there in silence. The hum of the air conditioner, the only sound between us. Then, softer, she said, I didn't know it was you until the elevator that day. I know, I replied. I never stopped feeling guilty about what I said that night. I looked at her, really looked at her. And for the first time in a long time, I believed her. But guilt, like rust, doesn't stop the damage just because it's been acknowledged. You don't need to feel guilty anymore, I said. You just need to make it right. How? She asked. That depends on whether you want to protect yourself or take responsibility. She blinked at me, then nodded. She walked out that day not knowing what would happen next. I didn't either, but I had decisions to make. Not just about Alina, but about the company, the people she might have hurt, the mess she left behind. This wasn't just revenge anymore. It was reconstruction, and the foundation was finally mine. I didn't hear from her for 2 weeks. After that meeting, I expected at least a lawyer's letter or a frantic follow-up. Instead, silence. Part of me wondered if she was biding her time, trying to spin some version of the story where she came out clean. Or maybe she was scared. Or ashamed. I didn't know. And to be honest, I didn't care much either. At least that's what I told myself. Truth was, I kept checking the HR access logs to see if she'd stepped foot in the building again. She hadn't. Jules and I spent the next several days tightening every bolt in Claro's internal infrastructure. We installed new compliance software, rebuilt reporting systems from the ground up, scheduled mandatory training for all remaining execs, no exceptions. I could see the staff responding. People who'd been checked out were suddenly showing up to meetings with notebooks again. Designers actually smiled in the hallways. The interns weren't walking on eggshells. It felt like we'd cleared a storm no one wanted to name until now. But even with progress, I was restless. Late one Thursday evening, after most people had cleared out, I sat alone in my office staring at a blank Word document. It was meant to be a formal memo to the board outlining the full scope of Alina and Carla's financial manipulation, but every time I tried to write it, I got stuck. Not because I didn't know what to say, because part of me still heard her voice. You don't understand. We were drowning. I remembered how many nights she stayed out, working late. How she never brought up the declining performance of her campaigns. Never once hinted that the company was failing. I thought she was just keeping secrets from me, but maybe she'd been hiding it from herself, too. I sighed, leaned back in my chair, and rubbed my temples. Then my phone buzzed. Unknown number. The message read, "If I talk, will you listen this time?" I didn't answer right away. A few minutes later, another message came. "There are things I never told you. About Darren. About the company. About everything." Another pause. Then, "Please. Just once. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking for truth." I didn't reply. Not that night. Instead, I walked down to the loading dock. Sometimes I did that when I needed quiet. The scent of cardboard and oil, the buzz of forklift engines, it grounded me. Reminded me of the warehouses I used to work in when I was starting over. Back when every cent counted and every decision could be the last if I screwed up. One of the security guards, Mick, nodded at me as I passed. "Burn in the midnight oil again, boss?" "Just thinking," I replied. He smirked. "Don't let it kill you. Thinking too much is how I ended up divorced twice." I chuckled. That's exactly what I'm trying to avoid. The next day, I found myself typing a single-line email. No subject. Conference room B, Saturday, 9 a.m. No promises. Just space to talk. I hit send before I could overthink it. She showed up looking tired. Not disheveled. Just worn down. Like she'd finally stopped pretending she was fine. We sat across from each other at the same table where I'd torn her down weeks earlier. Only now, I didn't feel angry. I felt like I was standing on the far shore of something that had once drowned me. She broke the silence first. "You know Darren left me, right?" I tilted my head. "No, and I didn't ask." She nodded, fiddling with the paper sleeve on her coffee cup. "He ghosted me 6 months after everything blew up. Said he wasn't built for pressure." I didn't respond. She looked up. "I didn't say that stuff to hurt you. That night, on the phone, I was just trying to feel powerful. I felt invisible." "That doesn't make it okay," I said flatly. "I know." She took a breath, like she was bracing herself. "The truth is, I was drowning. Professionally, emotionally, financially. I thought Darren could pull me out. And when he didn't, I clung to whatever gave me control. That meant the house. You. The image." I kept my hands folded on the table. She continued. When Claro started spiraling, Carla convinced me we could smooth the numbers, just temporarily. That if we got bought, the new leadership would sort it all out, and we could walk away before it collapsed. I knew it was wrong, but I didn't expect you to be the buyer. Would you have stopped if you'd known? She didn't answer right away. No, she finally said. But I wouldn't have tried to hide it from you. I would have told the truth. Maybe not for the right reasons, but I would have. I let the silence stretch. Then I said, you used to be better than this. I don't know if I ever was, she replied. I didn't offer her a job. I didn't tell her she'd be okay. I didn't tell her she was forgiven. But I didn't file a suit either. Not yet. Instead, I left her with one sentence. If you want to fix what you broke, don't do it for me. Don't do it for optics. Do it because you finally stopped lying to yourself. She nodded once, stood, and left. That afternoon, Jules knocked on my door again. This time with a different expression, more cautious. We got another email, they said, handing me a printout. I scanned it. Anonymous again. Another tip. But this time, it wasn't about Alina. It was about Darren. And it linked him not only to Claro's financial manipulation, but to 3 other companies that had collapsed mysteriously after quiet takeovers. I read the document twice. My heart didn't just race, it thundered. Because now, this wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about love. It was something else entirely. And the game was far from over. I sat at my desk for a long time after Jules left. The folder in front of me was thick. Printouts, emails, invoices. The kind of paper trail you don't stumble across unless someone really wants you to find it. Whoever sent it knew what they were doing. Darren wasn't just some sleazy ex. He was a predator. 3 companies. 3 implosions. Each with a paper trail of falsified earnings, fabricated brand value, and quick, inflated buyouts. Same pattern every time. Charm his way in, sow confusion, inflate the numbers, convince the board to sell, then disappear before the fallout hit the press. Claro had been next. Until I stepped in. I leaned back in my chair, staring up at the ceiling. How many people had he burned? How many families ruined? Careers ended, reputations destroyed. He thought he'd gotten away with it again. He was wrong. By Monday morning, I had a plan. It wasn't dramatic. It didn't involve headlines or handcuffs. It was quieter than that. Slower. Precise. Because real revenge, when done right, doesn't look like revenge. It looks like justice. First, I made some calls to a friend in internal compliance from my early consulting days, then to a couple journalists I trusted. People who knew how to connect dots without setting off alarms. Then I reached out to 2 other companies listed in the file, the ones Darren had sunk before Claro. Both had gone under within months of acquisition, but the people behind them hadn't forgotten. They were still pissed. And now they had evidence. What we built over the next 6 weeks wasn't a lawsuit. It was a coordinated, surgical strike. A series of public articles dropped simultaneously across 3 major business outlets, outlining how a charming but highly manipulative brand consultant had embedded himself into a string of companies, tanked their value, and walked away with stock, severance, and silence. No names in the first wave, just facts, patterns, dates. Whispers began immediately. Online forums lit up. Employees at other fashion firms started talking. Investors called for audits. CEOs rechecked contracts. Everyone started wondering, had we hired Darren? And then the second wave dropped. With names, pictures, emails. And the kicker? A 4th company, one that hadn't collapsed yet, posted a press release confirming they were terminating all contracts with Darren, pending internal investigation and serious ethical concerns. By the end of that week, his website was offline. His LinkedIn disappeared. His name was trending, for all the wrong reasons. And all I had done was share the truth. I never heard from him directly, but I got an anonymous email one night. No subject, just a single sentence. You don't know what you've started. I smiled, closed the laptop. Yes, Darren. I did. Meanwhile, Claro was starting to thrive. New hires were energizing the place. Jules's team launched a rebrand campaign that actually resonated. The office started feeling like a company again, not a ticking bomb. I was walking past the design wing one afternoon when a young woman, in turn, maybe, stopped me. Excuse me, Mr. Hart. Colby's fine, I said, smiling. She held up a mock-up poster. Would you mind looking at this? It's for the spring collection launch. I took the paper. Simple, elegant. The tagline read, built from the ashes. I nodded. That'll sell. She beamed. Alina didn't vanish after everything. She kept a low profile. Moved out of Minneapolis. Took freelance gigs under a different last name. One afternoon, months later, I got a letter in the mail. Handwritten. No return address. Colby, you didn't destroy me, but you forced me to face what I'd become. And in a way, I think that saved me. I won't ask you to believe I've changed. I'll just say I'm trying. You were never just a paycheck. I was the coward who couldn't admit she married a better person than she deserved. Thank you for the silence instead of the storm. And I folded it, put it in the back of my desk drawer, and never opened it again. These days, I live in a different rhythm. Still work hard, but I don't bleed for companies anymore. I own them, sure. Guide them. But I don't sleep under the weight of other people's ambition. I found peace in small things. Hiking, cooking, Sunday mornings at a coffee shop with nobody expecting anything from me. I don't carry anger anymore. But I do carry clarity. That some people will lie, cheat, manipulate, and betray, and still smile at you like they're the victim. You don't need to hate them. You just need to outgrow them. And when you do, the best revenge is no longer needing one.